A poor little girl suddenly shouts to the billionaire's pregnant wife, "Don't drink that juice, they put something in it." What the billionaire discovers next makes him cry in front of everyone. Please like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on what you think will happen next. Your engagement helps us bring you more incredible true stories of courage and redemption. The crystal chandeliers of the Mitchell family mansion cast dancing shadows across the marble floors as 7-year-old Emma Chen pressed her small face against the wrought-iron gates. Her worn sneakers, held together with duct tape, barely touched the ground as she stretched to see through the ornate barriers that separated her world from theirs. The October wind whipped through her thin jacket, but she didn't move. She couldn't move. Not when she knew what was about to happen inside those walls. Emma had been living on the streets for 3 months now, ever since the foster home had given up on her behavioral problems. What they called problems, she called survival instincts. She could sense things others couldn't. Danger, lies, the darkness that lived in people's hearts. It was a gift her mother had warned her about before the cancer took her away last year. "Trust your eyes, little butterfly," her mother had whispered in those final days. "They see what others miss, but be careful who you tell. Not everyone wants to hear the truth." Through the gates, Emma watched the elaborate garden party unfold. Women in designer dresses laughed airily, while men in expensive suits discussed business deals worth millions. Crystal glasses clinked with champagne and fresh juices prepared by the mansion's staff. Everything looked perfect, like a fairy tale her mother used to read to her. But Emma's gift showed her something else entirely. She watched as Harold Mitchell, the family patriarch with silver hair and cold eyes, whispered urgently to his son Richard. Both men glanced toward the center of the party, where Alexander Mitchell, the young heir to the Mitchell Empire, stood protectively beside his pregnant wife, Isabella. At 32, Alexander possessed the kind of confidence that came from never knowing want, but his eyes held genuine warmth as he placed a loving hand on Isabella's rounded belly. "The twins are going to change everything," Alexander was saying to Isabella, his voice carrying on the autumn breeze. "Father's already talking about updating the will. They'll inherit everything, the hotels, the real estate empire, the foundation. Our children will never want for anything." Isabella smiled radiantly, her hand covering his. "They're so lucky to have you as their father. Not everyone gets a second chance at building a real family." Emma's breath caught. Second chance. What did that mean? She watched Harold's jaw tighten at his son's words. Richard, Alexander's older brother by 2 years, clenched his fists. The brothers had always competed for their father's approval. But with Alexander's marriage and impending fatherhood, the family dynamics were shifting dramatically. "The juice bar is ready, Mrs. Mitchell," announced the head server, approaching Isabella with a silver tray. 3 tall glasses filled with vibrant orange liquid sat perfectly arranged. "Your doctor's special prenatal blend, fresh orange juice with added vitamins and minerals for the babies." Isabella's face lit up. "Alexander, look, doctor. Martinez said these nutrients are crucial for the twins' development in the 3rd trimester. Emma's heart began racing. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The server's hands were shaking almost imperceptibly, and Harold was watching the interaction with an intensity that made Emma's skin crawl. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of the man who had hurt her mother. It was the look of someone about to do something unforgivable. As Isabella reached for the glass, Emma noticed Richard pull out his phone and step away from the crowd. He typed something quickly, then glanced toward the juice tray with barely concealed anticipation. That's when Emma saw it. A tiny, crystalline residue on the rim of the middle glass, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Her mother had taught her about such things during their darkest days, when dangerous men had threatened them. "Poison doesn't always look scary, butterfly. Sometimes it sparkles like fairy dust." "No!" Emma screamed, her 7-year-old voice piercing through the elegant chatter. "Don't drink the juice!" Every head turned toward the gates. Security guards immediately began moving in her direction, but Emma's desperate voice carried across the expansive garden. "They put something in it. They're trying to kill your babies." Isabella froze, the glass halfway to her lips. Alexander's face went white as he processed the child's words. The entire party had fallen silent, with over 50 guests staring at the small figure outside the gates. "Get that street rat away from here," Harold barked to security. "She's obviously disturbed." But Alexander was already moving. In 3 long strides, he reached the juice tray and knocked all 3 glasses to the ground. The crystal shattered against the marble, sending orange liquid and tiny shards everywhere. "What are you doing?" Isabella gasped. Alexander's eyes were fixed on Emma, who was now surrounded by security guards, but still shouting desperately. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew which glass was meant for you." The realization hit him like a physical blow. The middle glass, the one the server had positioned directly in front of Isabella, was the only one that sparkled differently in the light. Even from a distance, even through iron gates, this 7-year-old child had seen what none of the adults had noticed. "Call Dr. Martinez immediately," Alexander commanded the nearest staff member. "Tell him to bring his emergency testing kit. Now!" As security tried to escort Emma away, she locked eyes with Alexander. In that moment, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Those eyes, dark brown with flecks of gold around the iris, were eerily familiar. They reminded him of someone from his past, someone he had tried desperately to forget. "Wait," he called to security. "Bring her inside." "Alexander, you can't be serious," Harold protested. "She's clearly unstable. Look at her clothes, her condition. She probably hasn't had a decent meal in weeks." But Alexander wasn't listening to his father anymore. He was studying Emma's face as the guards brought her through the gates. The shape of her nose, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she held her chin up despite being obviously terrified, it all triggered memories he had buried deep. "What's your name?" he asked gently, kneeling down to her level. "Emma," she whispered, her small voice barely audible. "Emma Chen." Alexander's world tilted. Chen. The name hit him like a sledgehammer, bringing back memories of Maria Chen, a young woman he had loved desperately 8 years ago, before his father had forced him to choose between love and family legacy. "Your mother," he said, his voice shaking. "What was your mother's name?" "Maria," Emma replied, tears beginning to flow down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "Maria Chen. She died last year from cancer. She always said my daddy was a good man who just couldn't find us." The color drained from Alexander's face. Around them, the party guests whispered and pointed, but their voices seemed to come from underwater. Harold and Richard exchanged panicked glances as they realized the implications of this revelation. Dr. Martinez arrived 20 minutes later with his portable laboratory equipment. The tests on the shattered glass fragments confirmed everyone's worst fears. The middle glass had contained enough concentrated arsenic to kill both Isabella and the twins within hours. As the doctor explained the findings to an increasingly horrified crowd, Alexander kept staring at Emma. This 7-year-old girl, dirty, homeless, and abandoned, had just saved his wife and unborn children. But more than that, if she was telling the truth about her mother, she was also the daughter he had never known existed. "Someone in this family tried to murder my wife and children," Alexander announced to the stunned gathering. His voice carried a cold fury that made even the most powerful business associates step back. He looked directly at his father and brother. "And I'm going to find out who." Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Alexander," she whispered, using the formal address her mother had taught her for important people. "There's something else. My mama left me a letter before she died. She said to give it to you if I ever found you." With trembling hands, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, sealed with wax, and somehow kept pristine despite her months on the streets. As Alexander took the letter, his name written in Maria's familiar handwriting, he knew that whatever it contained would change everything. The truth about Emma, about Maria's death, and about his family's willingness to commit murder was about to surface. But first, he had twins to protect and a daughter to save. The Mitchell family's private study had never felt smaller. Alexander sat across from Emma at his massive mahogany desk, the sealed letter from Maria lying between them like a loaded weapon. Isabella rested on the leather sofa nearby, her hands protectively covering her belly, while Dr. Martinez monitored her vitals. The entire family had been confined to the mansion while police investigated the poisoning attempt. "Before I open this," Alexander said softly to Emma, "I need you to tell me everything you remember about your mother, about your life, about how you ended up on the streets." Emma's small legs dangled from the oversized chair. Despite the mansion's warmth, she kept her thin jacket zipped up tight, as if it could protect her from more than just the cold. "Mama worked 3 jobs, she began, her voice steadier than expected for a 7-year-old. She cleaned offices at night, worked at a flower shop during the day, and sometimes helped at the restaurant on weekends. She never stopped working, never stopped trying to make enough money to find you." Alexander's throat tightened. "Find me? What do you mean?" "She said you didn't know about me. That bad people made you go away before I was born. She saved every penny she could, trying to hire someone to help her track you down. She showed me pictures of you from newspapers and magazines, said one day we'd be a real family." Isabella wiped away tears as she listened. Despite everything that had happened, her heart broke for this little girl who had lived her entire life dreaming of a father who never knew she existed. "What happened when she got sick?" Alexander asked gently. Emma's composure cracked slightly. "The cancer came fast. She couldn't work anymore, couldn't pay rent. The hospital bills took everything. When she died, I had nowhere to go. The state put me with the Hendersons, but they had too many kids already. They said I was too much trouble because I kept having nightmares and seeing things that scared me." "What kind of things?" Alexander leaned forward, remembering her uncanny ability to spot the poison. "Bad things before they happen. Like when Mr. Henderson was going to hit little Joey, or when Mrs. Henderson was going to burn dinner because she was drinking again. Mama said it was a gift, but it made people uncomfortable. The Hendersons gave me back to the state after 2 months." Alexander's hands clenched into fists. While he had been living in luxury, his daughter had been bouncing between foster homes, using her strange gift to protect other children from abuse. "The second family was worse," Emma continued matter-of-factly. "The dad tried to touch the older girls at night. I saw it happening and told the social worker, but they didn't believe me. Called me a troublemaker with an overactive imagination. When I ran away the 3rd time, they stopped looking for me." 3 months ago, Alexander said, the timeline clicking into place. "You've been on the streets for 3 months." Emma nodded. "I sleep in the park mostly, or in the doorways downtown when it's cold. There's a nice lady at the diner who gives me leftover sandwiches sometimes. I was walking past your house today, looking for bottles to return for money when I saw the party. I wasn't going to bother anyone, but then I saw the man put something in the juice, and I couldn't let the lady drink poison." "What man?" Alexander's voice sharpened. "Describe exactly what you saw." "The older man with silver hair. He walked up to the drinks table when everyone was distracted by the lady in the red dress singing. He had a small bottle hidden in his jacket. He poured just a tiny bit into the middle glass, then stirred it with his finger real quick. Alexander's blood ran cold. Harold. His own father had personally poisoned Isabella's drink. Are you absolutely certain it was the man with silver hair, not one of the servers?" Emma nodded emphatically. The servers were all wearing white gloves. This man had a big gold ring on his finger. It caught the light when he stirred the drink. And he kept looking around to make sure nobody was watching, but he didn't think to look outside the fence. Isabella gasped from the sofa. "Harold's Harvard class ring. He never takes it off." Alexander felt the world shift beneath him. His father hadn't just approved of the murder attempt, he had carried it out personally. The man who had raised him, who had taught him about honor and family legacy, had been willing to kill his own grandchildren to prevent them from inheriting the Mitchell fortune. "We need to call Detective Morrison immediately," Isabella said, reaching for her phone. "Wait." Alexander picked up Maria's letter. "Let me read this first. If Emma is my daughter, if Maria kept records or evidence of our relationship, it changes everything about the family dynamics. It explains why Father would be desperate enough to commit murder." With trembling hands, he broke the wax seal. The letter was written on simple notebook paper, but Maria's careful handwriting was unmistakable. "My dearest Alexander, if Emma is reading this to you, it means I am gone, and she has found you at last. I pray this day never comes, but I must prepare for the possibility that the cancer will take me before I can see you again. First, you must know that Emma is your daughter. Born February 14th, 2016, at 3:17 a.m. after 18 hours of labor that I faced alone, because I couldn't burden you with the truth. Your father made it very clear what would happen if I ever contacted you again." Alexander's hands shook as he continued reading. Emma watched his face carefully, seeing emotions flicker across it like storm clouds. "Harold visited me 3 times during my pregnancy. The first time, he offered me money to disappear and never contact your family again. When I refused, he threatened to destroy you, said he would disown you, cut you off from the family business, and make sure you never saw a penny of Mitchell money if I didn't vanish completely. The second visit came when I was 7 months pregnant. Harold brought legal documents claiming I was a prostitute trying to trap you with a fake pregnancy. He said he had doctors who would testify that the baby couldn't be yours, judges who would rule against me, and lawyers who would destroy my reputation. I was scared and alone, Alexander. I believed him. The third visit was the worst. Harold brought pictures of you with Isabella, announcing your engagement. He said you had chosen to marry for love and business alliance, that I was nothing but a phase you had already forgotten. He offered me $50,000 to sign papers agreeing never to contact you or claim paternity for the baby. I took the money, ashamed and heartbroken, thinking it was what you wanted." Alexander's face had gone completely white. Isabella was crying openly now, and Emma watched her father's world crumble with each word. "I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Every day I looked at Emma's eyes, your eyes, and remembered the man who promised we would face everything together. I used Harold's money to give her the best life I could, but it wasn't enough. When I got sick, the medical bills took everything. In my final weeks, I hired a private investigator with the last of my savings. What he discovered about your family will shock you. Harold has been systematically destroying anyone who threatens his control over the Mitchell empire. There have been others before me, Alexander. Other women who claimed relationships with Mitchell men, other potential heirs who disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. The investigators' files are hidden in Safety Deposit Box 447 at First National Bank, registered under Emma's name. The key is sewn into the lining of her jacket, the jacket I made sure she would never throw away because it contains her inheritance of truth. Please forgive me for keeping Emma from you. I thought I was protecting you both. I was wrong. All my love, Maria P.S. Tell Emma that her mama's butterfly is finally free and that her daddy's love was worth waiting for." Alexander set the letter down with shaking hands. Emma was crying now, understanding for the first time that her father hadn't abandoned them by choice. He had never known they existed. "Daddy," she whispered, the word foreign on her tongue, but feeling right somehow. Before Alexander could respond, Harold's voice boomed from the study doorway. "I see you've read Maria's little fairy tale," the patriarch said coldly. "How touching. But it changes nothing. That child is not a Mitchell, and she never will be." Alexander stood slowly, his body radiating barely controlled fury. "You poisoned my wife, you tried to kill my children, and you stole 7 years of my daughter's life." Harold stepped into the room, flanked by Richard and 2 men in expensive suits who were obviously family lawyers. "I protected this family from gold-digging whores and their bastard children. Everything I did was for the Mitchell legacy." "Emma," Alexander said without taking his eyes off his father, "show me where your mother hid the key." Emma slipped off the chair and carefully unzipped her jacket. Her small fingers found a hidden seam near the bottom hem and worked at it until a tiny key fell into her palm. "Safety deposit box 447, she said, holding it up. "Mama said it contained the truth about everything." Harold's confident facade cracked slightly. "Whatever lies Maria collected won't hold up in court. I have lawyers, judges, politicians in my pocket. You think the word of a dead woman and her delusional child can destroy what I've built?" Alexander moved toward his father with deadly calm. "I think you're about to find out exactly how much damage the truth can do." But Harold wasn't finished. "You want to know the truth, Alexander? The truth is that Maria wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. Any woman who threatens this family's stability disappears. Any child who might claim Mitchell inheritance meets unfortunate accidents. It's been that way for 3 generations." The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Harold had just confessed to multiple murders in front of witnesses. "And now," Harold continued, his eyes fixed on Emma, "history repeats itself. The child will disappear, just like the others. The only question is whether you want to watch it happen, or if you'd prefer to be looking the other way like your grandfather always did." Emma pressed closer to Alexander, her 7-year-old mind finally understanding the full scope of the danger she was in. Her gift had saved the twins, but now it had painted a target on her own back. Alexander picked up his daughter and held her protectively. "The only person disappearing tonight is you, Father. Detective Morrison has been listening to every word through Isabella's phone. The police are already surrounding the house." Harold's face twisted with rage as sirens became audible in the distance. But Richard stepped forward with a cruel smile. "You think this ends with Father's arrest?" he laughed. You think the organization dies with one old man? Alexander, you have no idea how deep this goes, or how many people want that little girl dead before she can inherit what's rightfully ours." As police lights flashed through the study windows, Emma looked up at her father with those unnaturally perceptive eyes. "Daddy," she whispered urgently, "Uncle Richard has a gun. He's going to try to hurt us when the police come in." Alexander's blood turned to ice as he realized the poisoning had been just the beginning. The real war for his family's survival was about to start. The police sirens grew louder as Detective Morrison's team surrounded the Mitchell mansion. Alexander clutched Emma protectively while keeping his eyes locked on Richard, who had subtly positioned himself between the family and the study's main exit. Isabella remained on the sofa, her pregnancy making quick movement impossible. "You always were too trusting, little brother," Richard said, his hand moving incrementally toward his jacket. "Did you really think Father acted alone? Did you honestly believe this was just about your precious twins inheriting a few hotels?" Harold stepped closer to his eldest son, his face a mask of cold calculation despite the approaching police. The Mitchell Empire spans 12 countries and generates over $2 billion annually. We control senators, judges, and police commissioners. You think a few local cops can touch us? Emma pressed her face against Alexander's chest, but her eyes remained fixed on Richard. Her gift was screaming warnings. She could see the violence about to unfold as clearly as if it had already happened. "Daddy," she whispered so quietly only Alexander could hear. "He's going to shoot the floor first to scare everyone, then try to take me. But the lady police officer is coming through the window behind the bookshelf." Alexander's mind raced. Emma's predictions had been accurate so far. If she was right about the female officer, it meant Detective Morrison had split her team for a coordinated entry. He needed to buy time. "Richard, think about what you're doing," Alexander said aloud, subtly shifting position to shield Emma from multiple angles. "Whatever Father promised you, it's over now. The police heard everything. Killing us won't change that. Won't it?" Richard pulled out a Glock 19, keeping it low but visible. "Father confessing to old crimes doesn't prove we were involved in tonight's events. And if a homeless child tragically dies during a break-in attempt, well, these things happen in wealthy neighborhoods." Harold nodded approvingly. "The official story will be that the disturbed little girl somehow got inside, threatened Isabella with a broken glass, and Richard heroically defended his family. Alexander, you'll back up that version, or Isabella and the twins will meet the same fate as Maria." "You killed my mother?" Emma's voice was small but fierce. She lifted her head from Alexander's chest, staring at Harold with those unsettling, knowing eyes. "Cancer killed your mother, child. I simply expedited the process when she started asking too many questions about other missing women." The casual admission hit Alexander like a physical blow. Maria's cancer hadn't been natural. It had been induced somehow. Harold had not only stolen his daughter's childhood, but murdered the woman he had loved. "The experimental treatment drugs," Alexander realized aloud. "You convinced Maria to try that new therapy program, paid for her participation. But they weren't trying to cure her cancer, were they?" Harold shrugged. "Arsenic in small doses over several months mimics aggressive cancer perfectly. Maria thought she was getting cutting-edge treatment. She died believing she was unlucky, never suspecting she was murdered." Emma made a small, wounded sound. Even at 7 years old, she understood that her mother's suffering had been deliberately prolonged. "You monster," Isabella breathed from the sofa. "How many others? How many women and children have you killed?" 16 women over 30 years. Harold answered matter-of-factly. 23 potential heir children. Each one a threat to family stability, each elimination carefully planned and executed. The number staggered everyone in the room. Harold was describing a decades-long campaign of systematic murder, all to maintain control over the Mitchell fortune. Richard glanced at his watch. "Police will be at the front door in 90 seconds. Father, we need to move now." But Emma was no longer afraid. Her gift had shown her something else, something that made her small face light up with hope. "The investigation lady found the safety box papers," she announced clearly. "She already has all the files Mama left. And there's a video camera hidden in the bookshelf that's been recording everything." Harold spun toward the bookshelf, his face twisted with fury. "Impossible. We swept this room for surveillance devices." "You swept for electronic devices," Emma explained with 7-year-old logic. "But Mama's friend used an old wind-up camera, the kind that doesn't need electricity. It's been recording since I came inside." Alexander stared at his daughter in amazement. Somehow Maria had planned for this exact scenario. Even in death, she was still protecting their child. The sound of splintering wood came from 3 directions as police teams breached the mansion simultaneously. Detective Morrison's voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is SFPD. The building is surrounded. Everyone on the ground immediately." Richard raised his gun toward Emma, but she had already seen his move coming. As he pulled the trigger, Alexander spun away, using his body to shield her while diving behind the massive desk. The bullet shattered an antique vase instead of finding its target. "Officer down! Officer down!" someone shouted from the corridor as gunfire erupted throughout the mansion. But the voice belonged to Harold, who had pulled his own weapon and was firing at the advancing police. Richard was trapped in the study, his escape routes blocked by the coordinated entry team. "Give me the child!" Richard screamed, advancing around the desk. "Give me the little freak and the rest of you live!" Emma peeked over the desk's edge, her gift processing the chaos rapidly. "Daddy, the ceiling light is going to fall in 3 seconds. When it does, grab Mama Isabella and run to the window." Alexander didn't question her anymore. He counted down silently, then launched himself toward Isabella just as the ornate chandelier crashed down, its chain severed by a stray bullet. The massive fixture blocked Richard's path while creating an opening to the tall windows. Detective Morrison appeared in the window frame, having climbed the mansion's exterior. "Mr. Mitchell, this way!" Alexander helped Isabella to her feet while Emma scrambled beside them. But as they reached the window, Harold appeared in the doorway, his silver hair disheveled and his clothes torn from fighting police in the corridor. "Nobody leaves," he snarled, raising his gun toward Emma. "The child dies here, tonight. The Mitchell bloodline ends with legitimate heirs only." "Harold, no!" Isabella screamed. But Emma was already moving. Her gift had shown her this moment clearly. Harold's shot would miss because Richard would accidentally bump his father's arm while trying to escape through the same doorway. The collision happened exactly as Emma had foreseen. Harold's bullet went wide, embedding itself in the window frame inches from Detective Morrison's head. In the confusion, the detectives' backup team stormed the room from behind, finally overwhelming both Mitchell men. "Emma Chen," Detective Morrison said as she helped the family through the window, "you are either the luckiest or the most gifted 7-year-old I've ever met." Emma smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. "Mama always said luck was just paying attention to what other people miss." As police led Harold and Richard away in handcuffs, Alexander held his daughter close while paramedics checked Isabella and the twins. The immediate danger was over, but Emma's gift was already showing her fragments of what lay ahead. More Mitchell family members were coming, people who had helped Harold over the years, who had their own reasons to prevent Emma from claiming her inheritance. The organization Richard had mentioned was real, and it extended far beyond the mansion walls. But Emma had also seen something else in her visions, something that made her feel safe despite the continuing danger. Her daddy was never going to let anyone hurt her again, and sometimes that was all a 7-year-old needed to believe in miracles. "Daddy," she whispered as they were escorted to safety, "there's something else Mama's camera recorded. Something about the real reason they wanted the babies gone." Alexander looked down at her, recognizing that they had only begun to uncover the truth. "The twins aren't just your babies," Emma explained with startling clarity. "They're the key to finding all the other children who disappeared. Mama figured out how to track the organization, and she hid the information where only family DNA could unlock it." As sirens wailed in the distance and news crews began arriving at the mansion, Alexander realized that saving Emma was just the beginning. Now they had to save all the other children the Mitchell family had destroyed, the ones who might still be alive, hidden away in the organization's web of secrets. The real battle for justice was just beginning. 3 weeks after the Alliance arrests, Alexander sat in FBI headquarters watching Agent Kellerman review case files with meticulous care. Emma waited in the child-friendly interview room next door, playing with toys, while a child psychologist monitored her emotional state. Isabella remained home with the twins under protective custody, as threats from Alliance associates had escalated since the story broke nationally. "Mr. Mitchell," Agent Kellerman announced, "Carlos Mendoza's investigation has yielded breakthrough information about the missing children." Alexander leaned forward, his stomach tight with anticipation. "What have you found?" Mendoza opened a thick file folder. The Alliance maintained detailed records of their operations, including a separate ledger for children who were removed from situations rather than eliminated. They called it protective relocation. Protective relocation? When killing entire families was deemed too risky, they would arrange for children to disappear into informal adoption networks. Families who asked no questions and maintained no legal documentation. Agent Kellerman added, "We've verified the existence of at least 8 children who were placed with families across the western United States between 2010 and 2020. These weren't legal adoptions. They were essentially human trafficking disguised as family placement." Alexander felt a mixture of hope and horror. "Are these children still alive?" "We believe so," Mendoza confirmed. "Emma's recollections of her mother's research have helped us identify several potential locations." In the adjacent room, Emma was speaking with Dr. Patricia Williams, the FBI's specialist in child witnesses. Through the one-way glass, Alexander could see his daughter carefully arranging toy figures while answering questions. "Emma," Dr. Williams was saying gently, "your mother showed you pictures and told you stories about other children. Can you remember any specific details about where these children might be living?" Emma nodded seriously. "Mama said there was a little boy named Marcus who got taken from his family when he was 5. She showed me pictures of the family who has him now. They live somewhere with lots of apple trees and mountains behind their house." "Do you remember anything else about this family?" "They're not bad people," Emma clarified. "Mama said some of the families who got children didn't know the children had been stolen. They were told the children were orphans who needed homes." Alexander's heart ached as he listened. Even in describing kidnapping, Emma maintained her mother's compassionate perspective, recognizing that some participants in the Alliance's crimes were victims themselves. Dr. Williams continued the interview patiently. "Emma, did your mother mention any other details about Marcus or the Apple Farm family?" The lady who has Marcus calls him Michael now because she doesn't know his real name, and the man grows apples for making juice. Mama said they live in a place called Sebastopol, something like that." Agent Kellerman was already coordinating with field teams. "Sebastopol, California. We can cross-reference apple farming operations with families who took in unregistered children during the relevant time frame." The methodical nature of the investigation impressed Alexander. Rather than relying solely on Emma's recollections, the FBI was using her information as starting points for traditional investigative work. "There's more," Mendoza continued. "The Alliance maintained safe houses in remote locations where children were held temporarily before being placed with families. Some of these facilities may still be operational." Alexander's blood ran cold. "You mean some children might still be imprisoned?" "It's possible." The Alliance was careful to maintain multiple operational sites in case one location was discovered. Emma's information suggests at least 2 facilities remain unaccounted for. In the interview room, Dr. Williams was showing Emma photographs of rural properties identified through financial records. Emma studied each image carefully, her young face serious with concentration. "That one," she said suddenly, pointing to a photograph of a remote compound in the mountains. "Mama showed me a picture that looked like that. She said it was where the bad men kept children when they were deciding what to do with them." "Are you certain, Emma?" "The swimming pool is shaped wrong," Emma explained with 7-year-old logic. "Most pools are rectangles, but that one is shaped like a kidney bean. Mama said the children there had to stay inside all the time and couldn't play in the pool." Agent Kellerman was immediately on her radio, coordinating reconnaissance of the property Emma had identified. The compound was located in the Santa Cruz Mountains, owned by a shell company connected to David Sterling's financial network. "We'll need a full tactical team," Agent Kellerman determined. "If children are being held there, we can't risk a botched rescue operation." Alexander watched the coordination with growing anxiety. "How long before you can move on the location?" 24 hours minimum, Agent Kellerman replied. "We need surveillance confirmation, warrants, and specialized personnel for child rescue operations." In the interview room, Emma had moved on to discussing other cases from her mother's files. Her patience and detailed recollections continued to amaze the adults present. Mama talked about twins who got separated when they were babies, Emma was telling Dr. Williams. A boy and a girl. The boy went to a family in Oregon who thinks he's their nephew from a car accident. The girl went to people in Nevada who were told she was abandoned at a hospital. Do you remember the children's real names? David and Diana Patterson. They're about 10 years old now. The boy likes to draw pictures of horses, and the girl has nightmares about someone she can't remember. Mama said if we ever found them, they would remember each other, even though they've been apart for 8 years. Alexander felt overwhelmed by the scope of the crimes. Entire families had been destroyed, children scattered across states, lives permanently altered by the Alliance's systematic cruelty. "Mr. Mitchell," Agent Kellerman called his attention back to the current situation. "We've received confirmation that the Santa Cruz Mountains compound shows signs of recent habitation. Heat signatures suggest at least 4 individuals on the property, with movement patterns consistent with restricted access areas. Children? Possibly. We're coordinating with local SWAT teams for a dawn rescue operation tomorrow." As the day progressed, Emma's information led to the identification of 6 potential locations where missing children might be found. Each lead required careful verification and planning, but the pattern of evidence suggested that the Alliance had been operating a sophisticated network of child trafficking disguised as family services. "Emma," Alexander said gently when they were reunited in the interview room, "you've been incredibly brave and helpful today. How are you feeling?" Emma looked tired but determined. "Mama always said that helping other children was the most important thing we could do. Even when it's scary or sad, we have to try to help." Dr. Williams spoke privately with Alexander afterward. "Your daughter shows remarkable resilience and emotional maturity. Her ability to retain and recall detailed information is exceptional, but more importantly, she seems to understand the significance of what she's sharing. Is she handling the stress appropriately?" "Better than most adults would. Emma has a strong sense of purpose that's helping her process trauma in healthy ways. However, we should limit her involvement to information sharing rather than operational participation." That evening, Alexander and Emma returned home to find Isabella preparing dinner with help from protective detail. The twins were sleeping peacefully in their bassinets, unaware of the ongoing threat to their family's safety. "How did the interview go?" Isabella asked, embracing both Alexander and Emma. "Emma helped the FBI identify several potential rescue locations," Alexander replied. "They're planning operations to find the missing children." Emma sat at the kitchen table, her small hands folded carefully. "Mama Isabella, do you think the children will remember their real families when they get found?" Isabella considered the question seriously. "I think love creates memories that stay in our hearts even when we can't remember them with our minds. The children will know they belong with their real families, even if they've been gone for a long time. Especially then, the love gets stronger when people are separated, not weaker." Emma smiled at this explanation. "That's what Mama said about you and Daddy, that even when bad people kept you apart, you still belonged together." Alexander felt Maria's presence in his daughter's words. Even in death, she continued guiding them toward healing and wholeness. The next morning, Alexander and Emma waited at FBI headquarters while tactical teams executed the rescue operation at the Santa Cruz Mountains compound. Agent Kellerman provided updates via secure radio communication. "We have visual confirmation of children on the property," came the first report. "At least 3 minors, ages approximately 6 to 12 years old." Emma gripped Alexander's hand tightly as they listened to the operation unfold in real time. Subjects in custody. Children are secure and unharmed. Requesting immediate medical and psychological evaluation teams. Are they okay? Emma asked urgently. Agent Kellerman smiled reassuringly. They're safe now, Emma. Thanks to your mother's investigation and your brave testimony, these children are going home to their families. The rescued children were Marcus Thompson, who had been living as Michael, 8-year-old Sarah Blackwood, and 6-year-old Timothy Chen, no relation to Emma, but another victim of the Alliance's systematic crimes. Emma, Agent Kellerman continued, Marcus specifically asked to meet you. He said he dreamed about a girl who would help him get home, and when our agents described you, he said you matched his dreams exactly. Emma's eyes went wide. He dreamed about me. Sometimes when people are in great danger, they can sense when help is coming, Alexander explained gently. Marcus felt your mother's love reaching out to protect him, just like it protected you. Over the following days, Emma's information led to the rescue of 5 more children and the identification of 12 families who had unknowingly participated in the Alliance's trafficking network. Most of these families were cooperative once they understood the truth, expressing shock and willingness to help reunite children with their biological families. The Patterson twins, David and Diana, were found exactly where Emma had indicated, living with families who had been told the children were orphaned relatives in need of homes. Their reunion, captured on video by FBI documentation teams, showed 2 10-year-old children immediately recognizing each other despite 8 years of separation. It's working, Alexander told Emma as they watched news coverage of the reunifications. Your mother's plan is working. Families are being healed. Emma nodded seriously. Mama always said broken things could be fixed if you were patient and careful and gentle. What do you think she would say about everything that's happened? Emma considered this carefully. I think she would say we're not done yet. There are still more children who need help and more families who need to learn the truth. Damn! Alexander realized his daughter was right. The Alliance's immediate leadership had been arrested, but the investigation was revealing connections to corrupt officials, complicit medical professionals, and financial networks that enabled the crimes to continue for decades. Are you ready to keep helping? Alexander asked. Always, Emma replied with Maria's determined expression. That's what families do. They help each other and they help other families too. As Emma's testimony continued to guide the FBI's investigation, Alexander marveled at the strength and wisdom his 7-year-old daughter displayed daily. She had inherited Maria's courage and compassion, but she was developing her own unique ability to see healing possibilities even in the midst of tragedy. The little girl who had saved his twins was becoming the voice for dozens of other children who had been silenced by fear and circumstances. And with each rescue, each reunification, each moment of justice, Emma was honoring her mother's legacy while building a safer world for families everywhere. 6 months after the Alliance's exposure, Alexander stood in the boardroom of the newly established Mitchell Family Justice Foundation, watching Emma speak to a group of federal investigators about the final phase of Maria's uncovered evidence. Isabella sat nearby with the twins, now healthy 6-month-olds, who seemed to respond to Emma's voice with unusual calm and attention. The last files Mama left show something different, Emma was explaining to Agent Kellerman and Detective Morrison. Not just missing children, but children who were never reported missing because their families thought they died. Alexander leaned forward. What do you mean? Emma spread out copies of documents from Maria's final investigation folder. Mama found hospital records where families were told their babies died during delivery, but the babies were actually given to other families. The implications were staggering. Agent Kellerman studied the documents carefully. Emma, These records suggest the Alliance was stealing newborn babies and falsifying death certificates. How many babies? Isabella asked, instinctively holding the twins closer. Mama counted at least 15 cases over 12 years. Emma replied matter-of-factly. Families who had expensive medical bills, or mothers who weren't married, or people the Alliance thought shouldn't have children. Detective Morrison was already coordinating with the Department of Health Services. If these records are accurate, we're looking at systematic kidnapping of newborns combined with fraudulent death reporting. Alexander felt sick thinking about families who had grieved children who were actually alive somewhere, being raised by strangers. Emma, does your mother's evidence show where these children might be now? Some of them. Emma nodded. Mama tracked 3 families who got babies they thought were orphans from private adoption agencies. The agencies were fake, but the families didn't know that. Agent Kellerman was taking detailed notes. Emma, can you describe what your mother found about these fake adoption agencies? They had fancy offices and lots of paperwork, but they were really just ways for the Alliance to move stolen babies to families who would pay lots of money and not ask questions. The methodical nature of the crimes continued to amaze and horrify the investigators. The Alliance hadn't just been eliminating threats, they had been profiting from human trafficking on multiple levels. There's something else, Emma added quietly. Mama found out that some of the doctors who helped fake the baby deaths were being blackmailed. The Alliance had information about bad things the doctors did, so they had to help or get in trouble. Medical professionals under duress, Agent Kellerman realized. That explains how they maintained cooperation across multiple hospitals and jurisdictions. Dr. Williams, the child psychologist, had been monitoring Emma's emotional state throughout the extended investigation. Emma, how are you feeling about sharing all this difficult information? Emma considered the question seriously. Sad for all the families who got hurt, but happy that the truth is helping people find each other again. Do you miss your mother more or less when you're helping other families? Different, Emma replied thoughtfully. I miss Mama for me, but I feel her with me when I'm helping other people, like she's still taking care of children, just through me now. Alexander's throat tightened with emotion. His 7-year-old daughter possessed an emotional wisdom that helped her process trauma while remaining focused on helping others. Over the following weeks, Emma's information led to the identification of Dr. Patricia Howell, a pediatric surgeon who had been coerced into falsifying death certificates. Dr. Howell agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for witness protection and immunity. I was trapped, Dr. Howell explained during her FBI interview. The Alliance had evidence of a malpractice incident from early in my career. They threatened to destroy my reputation and career unless I helped them with their adoption operations. How many procedures were you forced to falsify? Agent Kellerman asked. 7 deliveries over 4 years. The babies were healthy, but I was required to declare them deceased due to birth complications. The Alliance arranged for immediate removal of the bodies, supposedly for private burial arrangements. Where did the babies actually go? I never knew specifically. My instructions were to maintain medical documentation of death while the Alliance handled all other arrangements. I assumed they were being placed through legitimate adoption channels. Alexander listened to the interview recordings with growing anger. Dr. Howell had been a victim of extortion, but her cooperation had still resulted in devastating loss for multiple families. Dr. Howell, Agent Kellerman continued, can you provide specific dates and names for the cases you were involved with? I maintained private records, Dr. Howell admitted. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I wanted evidence in case I ever found the courage to report the truth. The doctor's records matched perfectly with Emma's information from Maria's investigation. Between Dr. Howell's documentation and Maria's detective work, federal investigators now had complete files on 15 stolen babies. The youngest would be about 2 years old now, Agent Kellerman reported to Alexander. The oldest would be nearly 14. All of them are living with families who believe they were legally adopted. How do we handle this? Alexander asked. These adoptive families aren't criminals, they're victims too. Very carefully, Dr. Williams interjected. We're dealing with children who have formed genuine attachments to their adoptive families, and families who have genuine love for children they believed were legally theirs. Emma had been listening quietly to the adult discussions. What about the real parents, the ones who think their babies died? Agent Kellerman's expression grew somber. Emma, that's the most heartbreaking aspect of this investigation. We've identified 12 families who are still grieving children who are actually alive. We have to tell them, Emma said simply. Even if it's scary or complicated, they deserve to know their babies are alive. Alexander marveled at his daughter's clarity about right and wrong. Despite her young age, she consistently chose truth and compassion over convenience or comfort. The first reunification attempt involved the Rodriguez family, whose daughter Maria, named after Emma's mother, had supposedly died during delivery 3 years earlier. DNA testing confirmed that the little girl was actually alive and had been living with the Peterson family in Sacramento. Both families deserve honesty and support, Dr. Williams explained to Emma, as they prepared for the complex emotional process ahead. The Rodriguez family deserves their daughter back, but the Peterson family deserves compassion for their unknowing participation in the crime. Emma nodded understanding. Like when someone gets hurt by accident, everyone needs help healing. The reunification process took months of careful counseling and legal mediation. 3-year-old Maria Rodriguez had no memory of her biological parents, but she had formed strong bonds with the Petersons, who had raised her. The solution isn't to separate families, Alexander realized as he watched the complex negotiations. It's to expand them. The final arrangement allowed Maria to maintain relationships with both families, with the Petersons serving as extended family while the Rodriguez parents resumed their parental rights. It was unprecedented in family law, but it prioritized the child's emotional well-being over traditional legal categories. Is this what Mama meant about love making families bigger instead of smaller? Emma asked, as they watched Maria playing with children from both families at a supervised visit. I think so, Alexander replied. Your mother understood that healing brings people together rather than pulling them apart. Endures. As more stolen babies were identified and reunification processes began, Emma's role in the investigation evolved from providing information to helping with emotional support. Her ability to connect with traumatized children and anxious parents became invaluable to the federal teams managing the complex cases. Emma has a gift for helping people see possibilities instead of just problems, Dr. Williams reported to Alexander. She's developing into a natural family counselor. Is that healthy for a 7-year-old? In Emma's case, yes. Her trauma healing is happening through her service to others. She's processing her own loss by preventing other families from experiencing similar pain. The investigation's final breakthrough came when Emma remembered a detail from her mother's last conversations about hidden alliance assets. Mama said the bad men kept special bank accounts with numbers that looked like birthdays, Emma told Agent Kellerman. She thought they were saving money for something big. Saving money for what? To run away to places where American police couldn't find them. Mama said they had plans to disappear if they ever got caught. The numbered accounts Emma described led federal investigators to offshore financial networks containing over $40 million in embezzled funds. The money had been systematically stolen from family trusts and charitable foundations over 15 years. "This is justice," Alexander told Emma as they watched news coverage of the financial recovery. "The money that was stolen from families and charities is going back to help the people who were hurt." Emma smiled with satisfaction. "Mama always said money should help people, not hurt them." The Mitchell Family Justice Foundation was established using recovered alliance funds, with Emma serving as the inspiration and guiding voice for programs designed to reunite separated families and support survivors of organized trafficking. "What would you like the foundation to do first?" Alexander asked his daughter. "Help all the children who are still looking for their families," Emma replied without hesitation, "and help families who lost children find hope again." As they stood together in the foundation's bright, welcoming offices, Alexander realized that Maria's legacy was expanding beyond their family to touch lives across the country. Emma's courage in speaking truth had not only exposed decades of organized crime, but had created new systems for healing and justice. The little girl who had saved his twins was now saving families everywhere, one reunification at a time. 1 year after the Alliance's collapse, Alexander stood in the Mitchell Family Justice Foundation's new headquarters, watching Emma interact with a group of children who had been reunited with their families through the foundation's work. The space buzzed with activity as social workers, counselors, and volunteers coordinated services for families affected by trafficking and illegal adoption schemes. Isabella entered carrying 18-month-old twins Sarah and Samuel, who immediately began reaching for Emma with delighted squeals. The bond between Emma and her siblings had grown incredibly strong, with the babies seeming to understand that their big sister was someone special who protected families. "The Peterson case is officially closed," Detective Morrison announced, approaching with a thick file. "All 15 stolen babies have been successfully reunited or placed in joint custody arrangements that prioritize their emotional well-being." Alexander felt a wave of satisfaction. "And the adoptive families. 12 of the 15 families have chosen to maintain relationships through expanded family arrangements," Dr. Williams reported. "The children are thriving with the support of both their biological and adoptive parents." Emma looked up from her play with the children. "That's what Mama always said would happen. Love makes families bigger, not smaller." The foundation had become a model for addressing complex family separation cases. Rather than viewing adoption fraud as a zero-sum situation requiring winners and losers, Emma's perspective had led to innovative solutions that honored all the relationships children had formed. "Emma, Dr. Williams continued, "The Department of Health and Human Services has asked if you would be willing to consult on similar cases in other states." Emma considered this seriously. "As long as it helps children find their families and doesn't take me away from Daddy and Mama Isabella too much." Alexander marveled at his daughter's mature approach to balancing service with family priorities. At 8 years old now, Emma had developed remarkable judgment about what she could handle emotionally and practically. The Foundation's work had expanded beyond the original Alliance cases to include assistance for any family dealing with trafficking, illegal adoption, or systematic family separation. Emma's insights about children's emotional needs had revolutionized how authorities approached reunification services. "There's something else," Agent Kellerman announced, entering with Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "We've traced the Alliance's international connections." Alexander's attention sharpened. International connections. The Alliance was part of a larger network operating across 6 countries, Agent Rodriguez explained. Similar family-based criminal organizations in Canada, Mexico, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Germany, all targeting wealthy families with inheritance disputes. Exactly. The organizations shared resources, information and methods for eliminating inconvenient heirs and trafficking children across international borders. Emma had stopped playing and was listening with focused attention. Agent Rodriguez, did they hurt families in other countries the same way they hurt families here? Yes, Emma. But because of your mother's investigation and your testimony, we now have evidence to help authorities in other countries identify and prosecute similar crimes. The global scope of the conspiracy was overwhelming, but Emma's response was characteristically direct and compassionate. Then we have to help the children in other countries too, she stated simply. Emma, Alexander said gently, that's a much bigger job than we can handle by ourselves. We don't have to do it by ourselves, Emma replied with 8-year-old logic. We can teach other people how to help families, and they can teach other people, and it spreads like when you drop a stone in water. Dr. Williams smiled at Emma's metaphor. You're describing exactly how social change happens, Emma. One person helps another, who helps another, until the help reaches everyone who needs it. Over the following months, the Mitchell Family Justice Foundation began partnering with international organizations to share methods and resources for addressing family trafficking. Emma's approach, prioritizing children's emotional needs while seeking solutions that expanded rather than limited family connections, became a model for reunification services worldwide. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime has requested permission to use our protocols as international guidelines, Isabella reported during a Foundation board meeting. Emma, who had insisted on attending board meetings despite her age, raised her small hand. What does that mean? It means the way you think about helping families is so good that people all over the world want to use your ideas to help children in their countries too, Alexander explained. Emma beamed with pride. Mama would like that. She always wanted to help children everywhere, not just the ones she could see. Indeed, the Foundation's success had attracted significant media attention, but Emma remained remarkably grounded despite the public recognition. She continued living as a normal child, attending school, playing with friends, and enjoying typical family activities, while maintaining her commitment to helping separated families. How do you balance being a regular kid with being someone who helps so many people? A reporter asked during a rare media interview. Emma considered the question carefully. I think helping people is what regular kids are supposed to do. When you see someone who needs help, you help them. That's not special, that's just being a good person. Her answer went viral on social media, inspiring other children to get involved in community service and family advocacy. The foundation began receiving letters from young people around the world who wanted to help with reunification efforts. We should create a program for children who want to help other children, Emma suggested to the foundation board. Kids understand things about being scared or missing your family that grown-ups sometimes forget. Uday, the Children's Advocacy Network, was launched 6 months later, training young people to provide peer support for children going through family reunification processes. Emma served as the program's inspiration and first trainer, teaching other children how to offer comfort and hope to those dealing with family separation. On the second anniversary of Maria's death, Alexander and Emma visited her gravesite, which had become a memorial garden maintained by families the foundation had helped. Hundreds of flowers and small gifts surrounded the headstone left by people whose lives had been touched by Maria's investigation and Emma's advocacy. Mama would be amazed by how many people remember her, Emma said, placing fresh butterflies flowers at the grave marker. She would be most amazed by you, Alexander replied. You've become everything she dreamed you could be, brave, compassionate, and strong enough to change the world. Emma smiled, her hand finding his naturally. I didn't change the world by myself. You and Mama Isabella and the babies and all the people at the foundation, we changed it together. As they walked home through the neighborhood where Emma had once lived on the streets, Alexander reflected on the transformation in their lives. The little girl who had warned him about poisoned juice had become a voice for justice and healing that reached across continents. "Daddy," Emma said as they passed the gates where she had first saved his family, "I want to tell you something Mama said in my dreams last night." Alexander had learned not to question Emma's occasional dreams about Maria, whether they were actual spiritual communication or her subconscious processing of loss. They always contained wisdom that helped their family grow stronger. What did she say? She said love is like a butterfly. It starts small and hidden, but if you take care of it and protect it and give it room to grow, it eventually becomes something beautiful that can fly anywhere and touch anyone who needs it. Alexander felt tears building as Emma's words painted a perfect picture of what their family had become. Maria's love, nurtured through Emma's courage and expanded through their foundation's work, had indeed become something that could fly anywhere and touch anyone who needed healing. She also said, Emma continued, that families are like butterfly gardens. They're beautiful, not because they're perfect, but because they're full of life and love and room for everyone to grow. As they reached home, where Isabella was preparing dinner while the twins played nearby, Alexander realized that Emma's metaphor perfectly described what they had built together. Their family had expanded to include not just biological and adoptive relationships, but a whole community of people committed to protecting and nurturing families everywhere. The little girl who had saved his twins had taught him that family wasn't defined by blood or law or tradition, but by the willingness to love and protect each other regardless of the circumstances. And in a world full of forces that tried to tear families apart, that kind of love was the most powerful weapon for justice and healing. Emma had indeed become the butterfly Maria had envisioned, beautiful, strong, and capable of carrying hope to families who thought they had lost everything forever. And as Alexander watched his daughter play with her siblings in the safety of their home, he knew that Maria's love would continue spreading through Emma's work for generations to come. The little guardian angel who had warned them about poison had become a force for healing that would protect families around the world. And the love story that had begun with tragedy and separation had transformed into a legacy of hope that would never end.